Joining us in studio is economist and Zanaco Chief Risk Officer Mutisunge Zulu to help us analyze developments around fuel and, of course, how things are going to be when it comes to countries like Zambia. Good evening.
Good evening, and thanks for hosting me.
Firstly, how big is the situation when it comes to developing countries like Zambia?
It's massive because, one, we are net importers. And then secondly, it's very interesting. Honestly speaking, what's happening right now is a manifestation of geopolitics. I think because of the Russia-Ukraine war, part of what we're getting in the interview is that Russia is the second largest producer of crude. So what the Kremlin has done right now is to, address an energy crisis within its domestic markets, but we're getting the spillover effects. They say it's temporal, the ban on diesel, but at the same time, I think what remains critical is that even before this ban, crude prices started to tick upwards, and the reason behind this was Saudi Arabia and Russia decided to extend supply cuts to the end of the year. So we're seeing crude at right about $94 a barrel, and if you compare to the last time the Energy Regulation Board hiked prices, we're looking at probably an average of $85 a barrel. And then what's not so good for Zambia is that our currency has depreciated as well. I mean, you have a currency that's reverberating between 20.8 and 21.1, which is not good because two key components and variables go into the computation of fuel prices, which is your exchange rate and the price of crude. So this is not so good because, I mean, a simple calculation will show you that you should expect that in the next adjustment, fuel prices should be higher. Already we're talking 29 kwacha per liter fuel. So 30, 32 is not so far-fetched. This is inflationary, number one, not so good for businesses. Private sector pulse is definitely under pressure. One other thing that we mustn't ignore is that when your crude prices start to go upwards, there's another component. Fertilizer prices also go up because manufacturer of fertilizer has crude as an input. So then trickle-down effects, energy is under pressure, food prices could be under pressure as well, making agriculture costly. So these are the key effects of whatever is happening in the outside world. We may have control a bit here and there on the currency, but we don't have control over crude prices. So yes, the world is bracing for an energy crisis, especially in the front of petroleum.
I'm certain that the question everybody has is there something we can do about it?
Well, like I said, control is definitely, first of all, there's two components I mentioned. There's the exchange rate, but the exchange rate has been communicating something to the markets because one, we import more than we export. So what the exchange rate is saying is let's produce more so that we export and start getting foreign currency, but those are long-term measures in the interim. And this is what the exchange rate has persistently been communicating all this time. So let's look at an exchange rate as a variable that's telling us something about structural issues and what we can pretty much do. On the side of crude, we have very, very little control. I mean, we are price takers, and what comes out of there maybe alternatives and say, what else can we use as a substitute? I mean, we've got nations that have sugarcane and they, are able to generate ethanol out of it, but in large quantities. But as for now, I think we are where we are. And inflation is actually going to result from all this. And inflation right now globally, look, it's a global headache for central banks, policy makers. And if this persists, it now starts to twist, the arm of monetary policy agents to hike interest rates, and that's why interest rates are high, because definitely those are actions to rein in and curb inflationary pressure. So I'd say, yes, the world is in a state of chaos. There's a lot that's happening, but what you're seeing in Russia is a manifestation of geopolitics on one hand, and it's also been interpreted by other schools of thought and analysts that probably Russia is trying to weaponize this position to hurt Europe, but that's not my area of expertise. But I think the timing is what is then critical and making all this very likely. But I would say, yes, there is an energy crisis globally.
Well, in wrapping it up, really, are we looking at long-term solutions? You've already touched on one, but do we also have solutions within the continent? Well,
I don't know about other countries, but I can speak for Zambia. What I do know is that I know that there are measures to ensure that, the importation of diesel directly to Indeni should cut out a number of those costs, such as your taxes and all, that should then moderate long term. And potentially, I mean, it would also makes sense to probably have a refinery and connect maybe via Angola. I think those things have been on the table, initiatives to intervene, and ultimately I think that the most sustainable measure would be to have control over our currency by improving our export capacity. That's boosting manufacturing, and eventually we wouldn't be dealing with such currency swings and volatility. But until we get there, I guess we'll have to deal with such swings here and there of market variables dislocated.
All right, so we've got to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for your input.
Thank you for having me.
All right.